that she always has as a mom to a boy. And she's still talking to her son like a boy. She stays oblivious to the need her son has to disconnect from her emotionally. She's ignorant that he needs to develop a healthy separateness in his masculinity. He's 18 years old and she's still going and waking him up for school. Do you know sons like that in your home? She's still covering for him, still driving him to his doctor's appointment, or making an appointment for his haircut, or writing his checks. She's so over-involved with love that she is suffocating his masculinity. No wonder when the camera goes on the sports moment on television, all those young athletes wave to mom. Hi, Mom. You're number one. Absolutely. They may be 23 years old, but she's still taking care of them. That's what I mean. And they're not doing it because they want to hurt their sons. Just the opposite. They want to love their sons, but they're loving them too much. And they just don't understand it. And there's no community of men that come in and say, enough! We're going to cut that cord. Secondly, what I call needy, hurting moms. This is women who, for one reason or another, have lost their relationship with their own husbands, and so their son is grafted in as the next best male companion. In a sense, they marry their sons. Their son becomes an unsuspecting surrogate husband to fill, in some way, unmet needs in her. And as the son seeks to move into adulthood, losing him for the mom means that she's going to become lonely and alone. And so she tries to hold on. She tries to stay in touch. She gets over-involved. She becomes intrusive in the son's life as he moves into adulthood. And even after he gets married, she moves into the marriage with him in one way or another. And oftentimes that creates conflict in his marriage between him and his wife. The wife says, "Why can't you keep Mom out of our lives?" And the son just wilts because he doesn't know how. Then thirdly, there's unwilling to release moms. These are the strong and strong-willed dominant types of mom who want and need control. They're the ones who say to their son when he's 28 years old, "John, you and Mary are coming to our house for Christmas, aren't you?" And he's powerless to say no. We need to stay home for Christmas this year with our kids. She's the one who comes over to John's house and says, "John, you don't mind if I smoke," if she lights up. She's the one that says, "Carl, your children need this," or "your house needs that," and then goes out and buys it for him without his approval or his wife's approval. And the wife says, "Send it back. We don't need her being involved like that." But he finds himself suddenly in this rock and a hard place. And now he's between two women and he doesn't know what to do, and he loses the respect of his wife as he stays bonded to his mom. And if the wife does stand up to his mother, then there's real problems. Because he's got divided loyalties. And boy, what a war that is. Then finally, there are the fill-in-the-gap moms. That's where dad is absent all the time, so mom, of course, fills the gap, but in doing so, she bonds too deeply to her son. The thing she really needs to do, and the thing that I encourage moms like that to do, is to find male mentors, whether it's Boy Scouts or a church group or an older man to get involved. But oftentimes she won't do that. What she'll do is she'll stay involved in his life and try to cover for the dad who left, divorced, died, or whatever. And by the way, next week when we talk about how to resolve this wound, we're going to see that Jesus had that problem with his mom. And I think you're going to get some surprising insights next week. Well, this is how the wound is inflicted. Let's just look now at how this wound manifests itself in adulthood. Basically, this wound creates in men one of two extreme responses. And I want to give you a quote from Prentice Tipton, an African American who wrote in a journal called The Crisis in Black Manhood, but it's a great insight into men, all men, although he's addressing the African American community. He says this: when mothers lead the family because the fathers fail to lead, either by absenting themselves from the home or taking a passive role, he says boys are deprived of the most important natural model of manliness. Growing up mainly under the supervision of women, many experience insecurity over their identity as men. Now I'm going to put the quote on the screen. One tendency, Tipton says, for boys growing up in such circumstances is to rebel against women who are authorities over them and become socially disruptive, irresponsible in family and work commitments, overly assertive about their manly prowess, especially in sexual areas, or leading lives characterized by violence and crime, alcoholism, and other addictions. In other words, he says, growing up in a home of a mom that's over-involved without dad, one of the tendencies that will be created in the son's psyche is to rebel against that suffocating control and become overly dominant in his own right or disruptive. A second tendency, he says, is for young men to identify with the adult women who are authorities in their lives and then learn to behave or react in ways that are more appropriate to women than to men. They become what I call soft males. To the extent that young males take either option, they do not learn the discipline, the responsibility, and the character involved in being a man. So, on your outline, here are the two responses that this wound creates in later adult life, and you can see if either one of these apply to you. Here's the first one. Men become dominant and controlling towards women if they had an overly involved mom at home. There are some sons, part of it's their personality, I believe, but there's some sons in that environment, and I think I was one of them. I was one of three sons. I reacted differently than my two brothers. But there's some sons who don't like all that over-attention and that over-involvement. They feel suffocated by it, so they contend against mom during their years underneath her care. And rather than folding into mom's over-involvement, they fight like crazy against it. They compete and they contend with it and they resent it. But the problem is that's how they learn to relate to women. So then they go out in adulthood and they relate to the other women in their lives that way. And they see all women as a possible threat to their independence and sense of masculinity. And they come to fear intimacy because if they get too close to a woman, that woman might control them. And so they always keep this kind of barrier up. Or what they do instead is they try to find a woman they can control. And they seek to marry women that they can be safe with, but primarily rule over. And they become tyrants in their home. And anytime that soft woman tries to express her rights and her needs, he sees that as you're trying to take control of me. So he becomes even harder and more dominant over her life. Do you see that? And the whole time he's trying to suppress her, he doesn't understand that a lot of that goes back to home. Because he doesn't know how to maintain a relationship with another fully formed individual who has rights and needs and expressions and equalities of her own. So he contends with women in his life. That's one of the way it manifests itself. And it can do it in varying degrees. It doesn't have to be a harsh tyrant. But, if your wife starts saying, now, why did you buy that car? We were on a budget, and you went out and bought a new car today, and you find yourself getting furious because you think, all of a sudden, you're trying to take control of me. When really what you did is act irresponsibly. It may be because back there, you're still fighting the shadow. Some men become dominant and controlling towards women. I think the greater number of men have the second response in adulthood. They become passive and submissive towards women. And guys, I want you to know, in the guys under 30, I think this is epidemic today. Because of an earlier relationship with mom, because she overdid it for him, overcared, overnurtured, overdirected, and he let her. He became overly dependent and overly responsive to women. And now as an adult with women, his tendency with a woman, as he gets close to a woman, is to become passive and to lean on her too much. Let her lead too much. Seek to take care of me too much because that's the way mom did. In other words, he pulled out that giant umbilical cord he had to mom, and when he got into adulthood, he pulled it out and he began to look for what other woman can I plug this thing into and suck all these things that I need for me, care and concern, taking my feelings and lead me and provide for me from her. And so he tends to go out and marry a stronger woman. And when he marries that stronger woman, in their day-to-day relationship, you can see it. Because when they encounter issues, he waits for her rather than initiate. He shuns risk-taking. He struggles in making decisions. He places a high emphasis on his feelings. He prefers other people's approval, especially his wife's, before committing. And he looks like a man, but he acts in characteristics that are a little more feminine. He becomes the soft male. And what he wants in a woman is a mother wife. And he finds it. And she marries him. And at the beginning, she thinks she's marrying a sensitive male, the alpha male. But in time, she learns to resent him because he won't lead, and he won't protect, and he won't take risk, and he won't step forward. And she gets tired of it. He's passive. The healthy path with mom should have been physical and emotional oneness with mom in the early years, and then a healthy and complete separation in the middle years, and then finally a healthy relational oneness with a woman in the final years. Marriage. That's the way it should be. Unfortunately, for a number of men, it's not that way in varying degrees. So the question is, how do you heal this overly bonded with mother wound? And how do you cut this invisible umbilical cord? Those are good questions, aren't they? And those are the questions we're going to answer next week. We'll see you then.